The Millionaire's healing deal. When a fake date became the only love that saved him, the city hums beneath him, but Ethan Hale does not move. He stands inside his glass-walled office, one hand pressed against the window as Manhattan flickers like a living constellation below. His tailored suit is perfect, his posture steady, yet something fragile trembles beneath the surface. On the desk behind him lies a single gold-edged invitation, its envelope split open as if it had been torn in anger. Outside, the wind rattles faintly against the skyscraper. Inside, Ethan's breath is the only sound. The man who built Hale Technologies with relentless precision now stares at a future he did not choose. Tonight, the millionaire looks less like a titan of New York and more like someone standing on the edge of a memory he cannot escape. He turns, slowly, as though the invitation might speak again. His jaw tightens. His eyes flicker with something raw, hurt, pride, fear, something he refuses to name. And beneath the polished exterior, a single question begins to echo in the room like a warning bell. What is a man supposed to do when the past invites him to watch it celebrate? And what happens when he decides he cannot face it alone? Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It was a chilly Thursday evening in Manhattan. The skyline shimmered with lights that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. Each window a tiny story of its own. But on the top floor of the Hale Technologies headquarters, the story unfolding was far from bright. Ethan Hale, the millionaire founder of one of New York's most promising tech companies, stood alone in his glass-walled office. To the world, he was the picture of composure, calm, confident, and untouchable. Yet inside, the man who built an empire from sheer intellect and persistence was wrestling with something no amount of success could fix. Pride and heartbreak. 3 years ago, he had been engaged to Clara Bennett, the daughter of a well-known venture capitalist. Their love story had once been the envy of the business world, the brilliant entrepreneur and the elegant socialite. But ambition has a cruel way of testing love. When his company faced a financial setback, Clara walked away. Weeks later, she was engaged to one of his biggest rivals. Now, that rival, along with Clara, was hosting a grand engagement gala that had the entire New York elite buzzing. And last week, an invitation landed on Ethan's desk like a challenge. The envelope was embossed in gold, the handwriting all too familiar. He told himself he would ignore it. But pride is louder than pain. And the idea of showing up alone, while the woman who once wore his ring toasted another man, felt unbearable. That was when fate, or perhaps irony, led him to Sophia Langford, a freelance event consultant with a sharp wit and a calm grace that immediately unsettled him. He had met her during a board meeting when his company was planning a charity gala. She was not impressed by his wealth or reputation. If anything, she treated him like an ordinary client. Her confidence intrigued him. Her directness disarmed him. And her independence reminded him of everything money could not buy. A week later, while scanning the guest list for the upcoming engagement party, Ethan noticed something unexpected: Sophia's name. Her agency had been hired to help coordinate the event. The same event that Clara and his rival would host. That evening, he called her into his office under the pretense of business. But as they spoke, the plan began to take shape. Reckless, calculated, and strangely human. He offered her a proposal, not of love, but of strategy. "Be my date for the event," he said simply. "One night. No strings attached. I will compensate you fairly, and your company's pending contract with Hale Technologies will be approved immediately." Sophia froze, uncertain whether to be offended or curious. The millionaire's tone was firm, but his eyes carried a hint of exhaustion. She saw not arrogance, but a man who was tired of being seen as perfect. After a long silence, she smiled faintly. "So, you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend too? Make your ex jealous?" Ethan did not deny it. Let us call it reputation management. Against her better judgment, Sophia agreed. She needed the deal to save her small business, and perhaps, somewhere deep down, she wanted to see what made this man so unreadable. They shook hands, sealing what would become the strangest contract of their lives. That night, as she left his office and the city lights flickered below, neither of them knew that this fake arrangement would set off a chain of events neither logic nor pride could control. Because sometimes, pretending to care leads to something dangerously real. And for the millionaire Ethan Hale, this was only the beginning. It was the beginning of a plan that made perfect sense on paper and no sense at all to the heart. The following morning, Ethan Hale's assistant handed him a printed schedule for the weekend gala. Every line item, every camera angle, every guest of honor. He reviewed it with the precision of a man used to control. Yet for the first time in years, his focus wavered. The image of Sophia's calm eyes lingered in his mind, refusing to leave. Sophia, meanwhile, sat at her small apartment desk, staring at the contract she had signed. It felt strange, agreeing to play a part in a world she never wanted to belong to. But business was business, and her agency's survival depended on it. She had built everything from scratch after her mother's illness forced her to leave her corporate job. There was no room for mistakes. On the day of the gala, Manhattan gleamed under a velvet night sky. Luxury cars lined the entrance of the Langford Hotel, and the press flooded the red carpet with flashes and microphones. Inside, champagne glasses clinked while a string quartet played softly. Ethan arrived in a tailored black suit, every movement deliberate, every glance measured. When Sophia stepped out of the car beside him, a wave of surprise swept through the crowd. She wore a silver gown that caught the light like moonlight on water, simple, elegant, yet impossible to ignore. For the first time that evening, the millionaire forgot the plan. He forgot the cameras, the whispers, even Clara Bennett watching from across the room with quiet disbelief. Sophia leaned toward him and whispered, "You wanted a performance, Mr. Hale. Shall we give them one?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Let us." As they walked through the hall, the murmur of voices followed them like a tide. Every handshake, every polite nod was another reminder that appearances mattered more than truth in this world. Yet somewhere between the glances and the polite laughter, something unplanned began to grow, something neither of them could quite name. During the first dance, Sophia's hand trembled slightly in his. He felt it, steadying her gently. The warmth of her skin, the scent of her perfume, the way she avoided his gaze. All of it blurred the lines between pretending and feeling. From across the room, Clara watched with a strained smile. The man she once left for power was now the center of attention again, but not because of wealth, because of the woman beside him. For the first time, she saw Ethan's eyes alive with something real. When the music faded, Sophia turned toward him and whispered, "Are you sure you are not enjoying this too much?" Ethan looked down at her, the corner of his mouth curving slightly. "Maybe I am. Maybe I forgot what it feels like to be seen." The words startled them both. That night, as they left the gala and the city lights shimmered behind them, Sophia realized the performance had gone too well. And Ethan, the millionaire who had everything, knew he had just started wanting something money could never buy. It was supposed to be one night. But every story that starts with a contract has a way of rewriting its own rules. And for Ethan Hale and Sophia Langford, the line between fake and real had already begun to disappear. The following morning brought a kind of silence that only comes after a night that changes everything. The city was awake again, taxis honking, steam rising from manholes, and the smell of coffee drifting through the streets. But inside Ethan Hale's penthouse, the world still felt like it was standing still. He stood by the window, staring at the skyline of Manhattan, replaying the image of Sophia Langford's smile at the gala. It had been effortless, genuine, unplanned, and it had burned into his mind more deeply than he wanted to admit. Ethan had built his reputation on logic, precision, and control. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts, predicted market shifts, and solved crises in boardrooms that most people would never understand. But this, whatever had started with Sophia, could not be analyzed on a spreadsheet. It was unpredictable, emotional, and dangerous in ways he could not define. Still, he found himself opening his phone more than once, scrolling to her name, and stopping, without sending a message. Sophia, meanwhile, was back in her small office downtown, surrounded by flower samples, design boards, and the faint hum of her computer. Her assistant was talking excitedly about how stunning she had looked at the gala, how social media was flooded with photos of the mysterious woman on the millionaire's arm. Sophia tried to brush it off, but every mention of his name made her heartbeat quicken. The whole thing had been an act, yet somehow, it had felt disarmingly real. Later that week, Ethan's company held a press conference to announce a new product line. The media showed up in force, but what caught the public eye was not the technology, it was him. Every headline mentioned the millionaire and his stunning companion. The story had taken on a life of its own, and Ethan realized that pretending might not be as simple as signing a contract. His board of directors noticed the coverage, investors smiled again, and suddenly the fake date had become a very real benefit. That evening, he invited Sophia to dinner under the guise of gratitude. They met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the East River. The lights of the city shimmered on the water like a reflection of everything unspoken between them. For the first few minutes, they talked about business, clients, and the media chaos. But as the wine flowed, the conversation drifted somewhere more human. Sophia asked, "Do you ever get tired of being perfect in everyone's eyes?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment before answering. Perfection is the loneliest prison in the world. You keep building walls so high that eventually, you cannot even see who you built them for. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Sophia's expression softened. For the first time, she saw the man behind the title. She raised her glass and said quietly, "Then here is to breaking walls." They both laughed, but the silence that followed was comfortable, not awkward. When dinner ended, Ethan offered to drive her home. The car ride was filled with the faint hum of the city and something that felt dangerously close to peace. As she stepped out, Sophia turned back to him and said, "You do not have to thank me for pretending, Ethan. I know what it is like to play a role you never asked for." He watched her walk away, her silhouette fading into the streetlights, and for the first time in years, Ethan Hale, the millionaire who thought he had everything, realized how empty success felt when there was no one to share it with. That night, as the city quieted and his phone screen glowed in the dark, Ethan finally sent her a message. Dinner was supposed to be business. "I am not sure what it became, but I would like to see you again." It was the kind of text that could change everything. And deep down, both of them knew, the line between pretending and feeling had already vanished. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm neither of them had expected. What began as a carefully staged arrangement slowly unfolded into something far more complicated. Ethan Hale, the millionaire who once lived by contracts and logic, found himself rearranging his schedule just to meet Sophia Langford for coffee, to walk her to her car, or to listen to her talk about things that had nothing to do with business. Sophia, on her part, tried to keep her emotions under control. She reminded herself that this was not supposed to be real, that their connection had started as a deal. Yet, every time she looked at him, the man behind the name and the money, she saw someone different. She saw quiet humor, gentleness, and a kind of honesty that came only from pain. One evening, she visited his office to finalize the last details of an upcoming charity event her company was organizing for Hale Technologies. The city lights glowed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long reflections across the polished floor. Ethan was seated behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, the glow from his laptop soft on his face. He looked up as she entered, and something in his eyes shifted. "You are early," he said, standing. "I wanted to go over the layout before tomorrow," she replied. "It is a big event, and I do not want anything to go wrong." "You will do fine," Ethan said, moving closer. "You always do." It was a simple compliment, but the warmth in his voice made her chest tighten. For a moment, they just stood there, two people who were supposed to be pretending, caught in a silence that felt dangerously real. The charity gala was held at the Metropolitan Pavilion. Reporters lined the entrance, eager for another photo of the millionaire and his mysterious partner. Ethan offered Sophia his arm as they stepped out of the car. The flash of cameras filled the air, and he leaned toward her, whispering, "Remember, we are still acting." She smiled faintly. "Are we?" Inside the ballroom, the evening shimmered with gold and crystal. The orchestra played softly, the guests mingled, and investors surrounded Ethan with praise. Yet, his attention drifted constantly to the woman across the room, laughing lightly with one of the donors. She looked radiant, natural, and utterly out of place in his world of power and pretense. And that was exactly what drew him to her. Later that night, they shared a slow dance. Her hand rested lightly in his, and as they moved across the floor, The noise of the crowd seemed to fade away. "You are very quiet tonight," Sophia said softly. "I am thinking," Ethan answered. "About business?" He shook his head. "About how easily something fake can start to feel real." Sophia met his gaze, her heartbeat stumbling. Maybe it was never completely fake. The music swelled, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. But just as quickly, the illusion shattered. A reporter approached, microphone in hand, camera light glaring. "Mr. Hale, people are saying your relationship with Ms. Langford is staged to distract from your company's recent controversies. Care to comment?" The question sliced through the room. Guests turned, whispers rising. Sophia froze, her eyes wide. Ethan's jaw tightened. He took her hand and guided her away from the crowd, past the flashing lights and questions. Outside, under the cool night air, Sophia pulled back. "Is that true, Ethan? Are they right? Was I just part of another business strategy?" His voice was steady but low. "No, not anymore. But it started that way," she said, her voice trembling. "You asked me to play a part, and I agreed. But somewhere in the middle, I forgot it was all an act." "So did I," Ethan said quietly. She looked at him, eyes full of hurt and confusion. "Then why does it still feel like you are hiding behind the contract?" Before he could answer, she stepped back. "I need to figure out what is real for me and what is not." Ethan watched as she walked away into the Manhattan night, her silver gown catching the city lights one last time before disappearing into the crowd. He stood there for a long moment, the noise of the party echoing faintly behind him. For a man who had conquered every deal, this was the first time he realized that no amount of wealth could bargain for a heart that chose to leave. And for the millionaire Ethan Hale, it was the moment he began to understand the true cost of pretending. Days turned into weeks, and the story that began as a whisper at the gala spread through every corner of New York's business world. Headlines painted Ethan Hale as the manipulative millionaire who hired a woman to fix his public image. The narrative grew faster than the truth could catch up. For the first time in years, Ethan avoided the spotlight. Meetings were postponed, interviews canceled. He spent long hours in his penthouse, the city lights flickering beyond the glass like judgmental eyes. The man who once built an empire on confidence and control now found himself haunted by a single face, Sophia Langford's. She had not returned his calls. Every message went unanswered. Ethan respected her silence, but it tore at him more each day. He could manage losses in business, but losing her was a different kind of failure, one that numbers could not repair. Sophia, meanwhile, was trying to rebuild her own life. The viral photos, the tabloid articles, and the rumors had cost her nearly every client her small company had. The phone that used to ring nonstop was now silent. Her office, once filled with light and laughter, felt hollow. Still, she refused to let bitterness take over. Late one night, she sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills and half-finished designs. Her mother's voice echoed softly from the other room. "Honey, you cannot let them define you. You are more than their story." Sophia smiled faintly, though her eyes were tired. "I know, Mom. I just need to remember who I was before all of this." The next morning, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text, but a handwritten envelope bearing the Hale Technologies seal. Inside was a simple note in Ethan's unmistakable handwriting. "Sophia, I know silence feels safer than speaking to me, but please know I never wanted you to be hurt because of what I started. If I could trade every dollar I have to undo it, I would. You once told me that real success is not measured in money, but in the people who choose to stand beside you when the lights go out. I am standing in the dark now, and I miss you, Ethan." Sophia read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer, and whispered, "You are too late, Ethan." But fate, as it often does, had other plans. 2 weeks later, a major charity event hosted by one of Sophia's old clients nearly collapsed when their venue canceled at the last minute. Desperate, she called every contact she had. None could help. Then, unexpectedly, her assistant rushed in. "You are not going to believe this. Hale Technologies just offered to sponsor the entire event. Full funding, no conditions." Sophia froze. Her first instinct was anger. He was doing it again, trying to fix things with money. But something in her heart whispered that maybe this time, it was different. The night of the event arrived. The hall was stunning, filled with soft golden light and music that hummed with warmth rather than luxury. As guests mingled, Sophia stood quietly at the back, watching everything unfold exactly as she had planned. Then she saw him. Ethan stood near the entrance, dressed simply in a dark suit. No entourage, no press. Just him. He approached slowly, careful not to disturb the atmosphere. When he reached her, he said softly, "I did not come here for attention. I came because I believed in what you built. And because I never got to say I was sorry in person." Sophia looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Why now?" "Because I finally learned that not everything broken can be bought back," he said. "Sometimes you just show up and hope forgiveness finds you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The music filled the silence, gentle and real. Then Sophia exhaled slowly. "You hurt me, Ethan, but I cannot hate you for being human." He nodded, eyes heavy with relief. "Does that mean I can help you again?" "You already have," she said quietly, "by showing up without an agenda." As the night drew to a close, they stood side by side, watching the donations pour in for causes they both cared about. It was not reconciliation, not yet, but it was something honest. When Sophia turned to leave, Ethan said softly, "If there is ever another chance, I would like to earn it the right way." She gave a small, thoughtful smile. "We will see, Mr. Hale." And as she walked away into the warm glow of the ballroom, the millionaire realized that redemption was not about rebuilding an image. It was about rebuilding trust, one step at a time. In the weeks that followed the charity event, something subtle but undeniable began to change. For the first time in months, Ethan Hale returned to his work with quiet determination rather than pride. The public scandal was fading, and investors who once doubted him began to trust his leadership again. Yet the success felt hollow without Sophia Langford beside him. He tried to stay focused on his projects, but every small victory reminded him of her. She had been the first person to speak to him like a man rather than a brand. The memory of her steady voice and honest eyes haunted him during every late-night meeting. He could close million-dollar deals with ease, but he could not silence the thought that maybe, just maybe, he had lost the one thing in his life that was truly real. Sophia, on the other hand, had slowly begun to rebuild. Her company received new contracts thanks to the visibility from the charity event, and clients who once doubted her professionalism returned with apologies. But beneath the renewed success was an emptiness she could not explain. Every time she saw a news headline about the millionaire, every time she walked past one of Hale Technologies' billboards, a quiet ache followed her. One morning, she received an invitation that caught her off guard. It was a handwritten note, simple, elegant, and familiar. "Sophia, I will be speaking at the Global Business Forum next week. I know you dislike crowds, but I would like you to come. There are things I need to say, publicly this time, not hidden behind contracts or pride." Ethan. For a long moment, she considered throwing the note away. But something in the tone, earnest, restrained, made her pause. Against her better judgment, she decided to attend. The forum was held at the New York Convention Center, filled with entrepreneurs, investors, and reporters from across the country. Cameras flashed as Ethan took the stage. He looked composed, yet there was a weight in his expression that those who knew him well could sense. After discussing his company's new projects and philanthropic work, he paused. Then he said, "There is something I have learned this year that no amount of business education could have taught me. I once believed that success was about control, about perfecting every deal, every move, every image. But control is not connection, and perfection is not peace." The room fell silent. "I made a mistake," he continued. "I turned something honest into something transactional. And in doing so, I almost lost the person who reminded me that truth cannot be bought or staged. So, to the person who taught me that lesson, you know who you are, thank you. This company, and this man, are better because of you." The audience erupted in applause, but Ethan's eyes searched the crowd until they found hers. Sophia stood quietly at the back of the room, her hands clasped, her expression unreadable. When their eyes met, she smiled faintly, small, hesitant, but real. And miles away, in a high-rise apartment overlooking the city, Clara Bennett watched the live broadcast on her television. Once, she had loved the man on that stage. Once, she had left him for a version of life that promised power but delivered emptiness. As she saw Ethan speak, not as a millionaire, but as a man finally at peace, Clara smiled softly and turned off the television. You finally figured it out, she whispered. Good for you, Ethan. After the event, Sophia tried to slip away, but Ethan caught up with her near the exit. You came, he said softly. I almost did not, she replied. Public confessions are not exactly my favorite thing. I did not do it for the cameras, Ethan said. I did it because you deserve to hear it. Sophia studied him carefully. You really meant every word, did you not? I did, he said. For once in my life, there was no strategy, just truth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the crowd faded around them. Finally, Sophia said, You cannot erase what happened, Ethan. But maybe, you can start again. He nodded slowly. If starting again means earning your trust, then I am willing to take the long road. She gave a quiet laugh. You always were stubborn. Maybe that is what it takes to win something. Real, he said, his tone gentle. As she walked away into the busy street outside, Ethan watched her go, this time without trying to stop her. Because for the first time, he understood that love was not about possession or pride. It was about patience. That night, as Manhattan glowed beneath his window, Ethan Hale, the millionaire who once lived for power, finally allowed himself to feel something greater than success, hope. And somewhere across the city, Sophia smiled to herself, knowing that for both of them, the story was far from over. Autumn arrived in New York with its quiet chill and golden skies. Months had passed since the Global Business Forum, and the city was already preparing for another winter. For Ethan Hale, life had slowly found rhythm again, but it was a quieter rhythm, built on reflection instead of ambition. His company was stable, his reputation restored, and the media had moved on to other stories. Yet, when he looked at the skyline from his penthouse each night, he could not help but wonder what Sophia Langford was doing. He had seen her only twice since that day. Both times had been brief encounters at public events. They exchanged polite smiles, short conversations, nothing more. But each moment had left an imprint stronger than words. Sophia had kept her focus on her business. Her company had grown steadily, with new clients and partnerships. Still, there was a part of her heart that felt unfinished. She told herself she had forgiven Ethan, but forgiveness was easier than forgetting. And every time she thought of him standing on that stage, speaking with vulnerability instead of power, she felt a quiet tug she could not ignore. One late afternoon, as she was leaving her office, a familiar voice called out behind her. Sophia. She turned and saw Ethan standing near the door, holding a small envelope. His expression was calm, respectful, and uncertain all at once. I hope I am not intruding, he said. I just wanted to give you this. Inside the envelope was an invitation, an exclusive event for the launch of a new charitable foundation, one focused on supporting small businesses led by women. At the bottom of the letter, in his handwriting, were the words, because what you built deserves more than applause. It deserves opportunity. Sophia looked up at him. You named a foundation after my idea? Ethan smiled slightly. I did not name it after you, but I built it because of you. She hesitated, then said softly, You did not have to do this. I know, he replied, but I wanted to. The night of the launch arrived at the Grand Meridian Hall. The crowd was filled with entrepreneurs, investors, and journalists, but the mood was different this time. Sincere, hopeful, grounded. Sophia arrived quietly, not as a guest of honor, but as someone who wanted to witness what her influence had sparked. When Ethan took the stage, he spoke not as a corporate leader, but as a man who had learned to see beyond success. We measure wealth in numbers, he said, but the truest kind of wealth is in the lives we lift. This foundation is not about me. It is about those who choose to create even when the world tells them they cannot. As he stepped down, his eyes met Sophia's across the room. Without hesitation, she walked toward him. The applause around them faded into the background. You really did it, she said quietly. I had good inspiration, he replied, and I wanted to build something real this time. Sophia looked at him, her expression soft but steady. You finally learned that not every story needs to be perfect to be meaningful. Ethan nodded. I learned it from the one person who saw me when I had nothing to offer. There was a pause, gentle and full of unspoken things. Then Sophia extended her hand. So, where does the story go from here, Mr. Hale? He smiled. Wherever honesty leads it. They stood there in the soft light of the ballroom, surrounded by laughter, hope, and the quiet hum of new beginnings. For the first time, there was no contract, no audience, and no pretense. Just two people standing in truth. And in that moment, the millionaire Ethan Hale understood that sometimes the richest thing a man can have is the courage to start again. Winter arrived early that year, dusting Manhattan in soft white snow. The city glimmered under the streetlights, alive with the quiet hum of the season. For Ethan Hale, it was a time of peace he had not known in years. The new foundation had become more than a project. It was a mission that gave his wealth purpose. And at the center of it all, one person remained in his mind, Sophia Langford. Since the launch event, their connection had grown naturally, without the weight of contracts or expectations. They met for coffee, for long walks through Central Park, and sometimes for nothing more than a quiet conversation. There were no titles between them now. She was not the consultant, and he was not the millionaire. They were simply Ethan and Sophia, two people learning how to trust again. One afternoon, as snow began to fall, Sophia visited his office for the first time in months. The place that once felt cold and corporate had changed. There were photographs on the walls of the foundation's work, letters from small business owners, and a worn leather chair in the corner that looked lived in. Ethan looked up from his desk with a smile. "I was wondering when you would stop avoiding my office." Sophia laughed softly. "I was not avoiding it. I just wanted to make sure this place felt human first." He gestured for her to sit. "Does it feel that way now?" She looked around. "Yes, it does. You finally built something that has heart." Ethan leaned back, his gaze warm. "You were the reason I started." There was a moment of silence, and Sophia met his eyes. "You did the work. You changed because you wanted to, not because of me." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but sometimes we need the right person to remind us what matters." That evening, they attended the Foundation's first anniversary gala. The hall was filled with people whose lives had been touched by their work. Entrepreneurs, single parents, small business owners. When Sophia took the stage to thank the guests, her voice was steady but full of emotion. "1 year ago," she said, "this was just an idea. Today, it is proof that when people choose compassion over ego, something extraordinary happens." Every story here tonight began with a second chance. When she stepped down, Ethan met her at the edge of the stage. He offered his hand, and she took it. For a moment, the crowd around them blurred into a soft haze of light and sound. "You spoke beautifully," he said. "I spoke truth," she replied. "The same truth you finally live by." Ethan smiled, a quiet warmth in his expression. "Then maybe truth is what brought us both here." As the orchestra began to play, he led her into a slow dance. There were no cameras, no contracts, no pretense, just the sound of music and the soft rustle of her gown against his suit. Sophia looked up at him and said softly, "It is strange how everything fake once led us here." Ethan held her a little closer. Sometimes the wrong beginning still finds the right ending. Outside, snow fell harder, blanketing the city in silence. Through the tall windows, the world looked softer, as if the past itself had finally forgiven them. When the music ended, Sophia whispered, "So, what happens now?" Ethan smiled, his voice low but certain. "Now we stop pretending that this was ever fake." She smiled back, and in that quiet moment, under the lights, surrounded by hope, everything they had built on pretense finally became real. And for the first time in his life, the millionaire Ethan Hale understood that love, not success, was the truest measure of wealth. Spring returned to New York like a quiet promise. The air carried the scent of new beginnings, and sunlight spilled over the city that never truly slept. For Ethan Hale, life had finally slowed to a pace that felt human. The noise of ambition had softened into something simpler, purpose. The Hale Foundation had grown beyond what he imagined. It funded small businesses, helped families rebuild, and gave others the chance he once thought could only be bought. Ethan no longer measured his worth in profits or headlines. Instead, he found it in the faces of the people his work touched, and in one person who had changed everything. Sophia Langford had become his constant. Their days were not filled with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. They were filled with laughter over morning coffee, quiet walks through Central Park, and evenings where silence spoke more than words. She still ran her company, still challenged him, still refused to let him hide behind his wealth. And he loved her more for it. On the 1-year anniversary of the foundation's launch, the board held a small celebration at the same ballroom where their story had once taken its most complicated turns. The lights were soft, the music low, and the atmosphere warm with gratitude. As guests mingled, Sophia took the stage to thank everyone who had supported their mission. 1 year ago, she said, this foundation began with an idea and a risk, but it proved something powerful. People can change, business can heal, and sometimes, the hardest journeys lead us right back to the truth. When she stepped down, Ethan met her at the foot of the stage. He handed her a small silver pendant shaped like an open book. On the back was a single line engraved in delicate script, for the chapter we never planned, but needed most. Sophia looked at him with quiet emotion. You always did have a way with words, Mr. Hale. He smiled. I learned from someone who taught me that real stories do not need perfect beginnings. They stepped out onto the terrace overlooking the Hudson River. The city stretched before them, alive with light. The same skyline that had once witnessed his loneliness now framed a man who had finally learned how to love. Ethan turned to her, his voice soft. You know, I used to think the world was divided between winners and losers, power and weakness, success and failure. But I was wrong. The real divide is between those who pretend to live and those who actually do. Sophia squeezed his hand gently. And which one are you now? He looked at her with quiet certainty. Alive. Completely alive. They stood together as a gentle breeze swept across the terrace. The lights of Manhattan shimmered on the water, and somewhere far below, a street musician began to play a familiar tune. Sophia leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder, and for a moment, the city felt perfectly still. Ethan Hale, the millionaire who once believed he could buy happiness, had finally found something that could not be purchased, bargained, or negotiated. He had found peace. And as the night deepened and the skyline glowed around them, the narrator's voice seemed to echo softly through the city that had shaped them both. Maybe, in every story that begins with a lie, there hides a truth waiting to be found. And sometimes, it takes pretending to discover what was real all along. Their story had begun with a contract, but it ended with something far greater, a love that did not need to prove itself, a truth that did not need to hide, and a man who no longer needed to be the millionaire to be complete. Because in the end, Ethan and Sophia did not just find each other. They found what every heart searches for, a reason to begin again.